Sota was a miserable virgin loser who got treated like a cursed object until the day he discovered his ability to control fate. With this newfound power, he tries to uncover the secrets of his world but gets distracted by plots, so he uses the power to rizz up 13 baddies who become obsessed and move in with him. It all starts with a girl named Nanami getting to a crossing point where she notices a guy wearing the same uniform beside her. Just then, Truck-kun goes off track and heads straight for them. But Shouta says something at the last moment and causes Truck-kun to get yeeted across the street. After getting to school later on, Nanami tries to remember his face and barely hears a word her hot teacher, Miyuki, says until she introduces Sota to the class. Nanami's reaction to seeing him again causes everyone else to question her sanity. So she waits until he gets seated and starts glancing over to figure him out. Moments later, a classmate tries to befriend him, but Sota takes one look at the signature doofus hairstyle he has on and immediately turns him down. After he also tells a self-obsessed baddie to take out her daddy issues on someone else and straight up rejects the baseball club, Nanami takes him up to the roof for an interrogation. The low-budget Sherlock Holmes asks why he keeps staring at people's heads before rejecting them and also demands to know how he saved them from the truck, so he tries to cook up a convenient lie. She responds by trying to give him a brain injury and tells him to drop the act, so he explains how he has a special ability to see and topple flags that appear on people's heads to signify something in their future. Hearing that, Nanami gets cracked up and asks why he is in school when he already has enough potential to become a world-famous clown. Sota then says he never expected her to believe and tells her to stay away because his powers cause pain to whoever gets close to him. Nanami only hears the part about him being a loner and calls him stupid for thinking anyone wants to get close to him in the first place. To prove that he is basically a one-way ticket to the other side, he tells her about a cruise liner that sank a little while ago and pulls out a newspaper that named him as the only survivor. Instead of walking away to avoid his curse, she tries to pluck his eyes out and claims he doesn't ever have to worry about seeing a flag on her head because she will never have any feelings towards such a sad excuse for a person. Realizing that she just wants to stick around and help his miserable life, he thanks her and they both get on a first-name basis before going to grab lunch. Just as they start munching, a hottie named Akane shows up to talk to Sota, and he immediately spots the friendship flag, so he rejects her. For some reason, the flag springs back up, so he keeps trying to scare her off, but after using every baddie deterrent tactic he can think of, she joins them to eat and tells him that Nanami is actually a princess. Nanami then tells him not to get his hopes up as she is just the 13th princess of an almost bankrupt nation that shipped her away to save money. Akane then offers to help with anything related to money, as she is the heir to a very successful financial group. After classes that day, Sota and Nanami try to avoid her by leaving early, but she catches up to them and excitedly asks to see his room. He then tells her that it has actually become a dumpster, but she offers to help clean up, so they all get on a train before he takes them to the crumbling wood shack he calls home. After getting to his room, Nanami asks Akane why she is so interested in being friends with them, and she responds, saying they look like miserable orphans in desperate need of love. Her response cracks Sota up, and Akane tells him to smile more often because it makes him a little less ugly, but he gets shy and heads into the little boy's room. Nanami uses the opportunity to ask Akane about her decision to follow them around again, so Akane tells her about an old friend that she got separated from simply because of their difference in social status. Akane goes on to say that seeing Sota made her feel optimistic about a second chance at having real friends, and that causes Nanami to stop seeing her as another obnoxious trust fund kid. Moments later, the girls get ready to head home, but Akane realizes that she left the hairpin from her old friend in his room, so she goes back up to get it right before Sota spots a death flag on her head. Scared that something in the house will make her kick the bucket, he runs in to stop her, but then she falls through the weak floorboards. Luckily, she survives, but the flag keeps getting stronger, so he tries telling her a bunch of stuff about her past to see if it will topple it, but nothing works. When she grabs his face to thank him for trying so hard to help, he sees a little love flag and makes a split-second decision to save her with a kiss. The risky move then causes a new marriage flag to spring up, but Nanami drop-kicks him before he can figure out what happened. Later that night, he washes his face to numb the pain from Nanami's kick and still tries to wrap his head around what happened before seeing the huge death flag on his head. Sometime in the past, Sota was on the cruise liner talking to his sister when he got blinded by a hat and saw a mysterious girl named Sakura. Afterwards, he went to have a chat with her and ignored the fact that she was practically a human nightstand so they could play a game. At school the next day, Nanami still refuses to speak with him as punishment for sucking faces with Akane, and he tries to explain that she would have gone back to the Lord if he didn't kiss life back into her body. Just as Akane shows up and starts acting like a love-hungry lunatic, a chick named Kikonu walks in and pounces on Sota before writing his morning brick, while everyone in class gets horrified. Nanami immediately tries to murk them both for having no shame, so Kikonu explains that they are childhood friends who got separated because she was sent overseas. After classes that day, she follows them back to his place and breaks down when she sees that he has been living like a fugitive. On the train ride to school the next day, Nanami tells Sota to stop letting Kikonu treat him like a stupid little brother so the sisterly love flag on her head can get toppled. He then decides to take her advice for once and tells Kikonu to stop practicing single mother life on him, but she remains oblivious and promises to take care of him no matter the cost. Later on, she takes them to see Tsumuji, a school elder known for having Einstein-level IQ despite still needing potty training. Tsumuji tells them to forget about ever trying to fix up the abandoned dorm building as it has already been condemned. But then a chick named Momori, who clearly watched too many Wonder Woman movies, shows up and swears to help out with her power as the student council president. When they get back to the place, she calls out a civil engineering club of feminists to handle the job, but the anti-patriarchy baddies quickly realize that they can't gaslight their way out of rebuilding such a worn-out building. Thankfully, Akane had already called the boys in their class because she had enough brain cells left to understand that equality is a term used by dimwits. After a week of work, they manage to give the dorm life again, so Sota and the girls join in to help finish up. At one point, he spots one of the guys going upstairs and asks for help. But then he sees Megumu's feminine face and tries to apologize for thinking he was a guy. Megumu then grabs his hand and says he actually is, so Sota asks why he dresses like a sausage lover, and he explains how his sister turned him into a femboy. He then gets dozens of friendship flags and excitedly asks to become the latest harem member. But before Sota can explain that he isn't into ditty behavior, the girls find them and gladly welcome Megumu to the family. After they all finish setting up the dorm, Momori tells Sota that he has to get other people to live in the dorm to avoid getting it shut down and runs off before he can complain about it. He then accepts that he will become homeless again, but the girls all decide to move in with him. Later on, they all get into the bath to wash off the sweat and dirt from a hard day's work, while Sota tries to protect his glizzy from Megumu, who then suggests spying on the girls to prove that he also likes cakes. When they get to the bath, Sota starts to have second thoughts, so Megumu pushes him in before running off, causing him to see all their chest pillows before Nanami gives him a concussion. Afterwards, he spots a flag in one of the rooms, and it leads him to a letter that reminds him of the weird chess game he played with Sakura before she told him about the flags and gave him her powers. The next morning, Sota wakes up to Akane trying to ride his morning wood, but Nanami crashes the party to stop them from turning the dorm into a breeding ground. Akane then explains that it was Kikonu who gave her a key so she could get some man milk from him, but they notice something else on the bed and find Megumu using his glizzy to stay warm. After he also tells them that Kikonu was behind it, the cultured pimp shows up to see if they got railed by him. Just then, they hear helicopter blades and see a military-grade gunship dropping off a pod. They then go out to see what's inside and meet an android named Ruri, but she loses her head before they can ask questions. After managing to get her head back in place, she introduces herself as an assistant android sent by Akane's family to keep her safe from Sota's meat stick. Due to already being late for school, they all hold a meeting to decide on letting her stay, and Nanami warns Sota against trying to turn her into a fleshlight before they all head out. Later on, they meet up on the roof for lunch, and Ruri gets plugged into an outlet to refill the energy she lost while trying to decode Gen Z slang. Just then, Mamoru takes over all the screens on campus for an announcement informing all the students of an athletic carnival to be held for an entire week. After hearing that the strongest team will become the MVP, Kikonu and the girls start coming up with ideas to dominate the carnival with Sota. Moments later, Mamoru shows up to tell them that the dorm will likely get closed down. Earlier that day, Mamoru, who is also the acting chancellor, had a meeting with the school's executive council, who were all pissed off to hear that Sota was living with the hottest girls on campus. She then told them to stop being jealous brats just because they got played in their high school years, but they still refused to accept it. She then offered to shut the dorm down if Sota and the girls failed to win the carnival. Hearing that she is actually the reason their harem is at risk, Hikoku knocks her down and threatens to smash her ugly face in. But Sota manages to calm her down. Mamoru then tells them not to worry because she called for help from a David Goggins fanatic and wishes them luck before heading out to handle other council issues. Just as the girls huddle around Sota to figure out who the trainer is, an arrow almost takes off Sota's nutsack, and Rin introduces herself with a promise to fix Sota's pathetic weakness so they can win the carnival. The next morning, she wakes them all up before sunrise and spends the day forcing them through countless drills before giving the girls a break to focus on Sota. When he stops to catch his breath, she asks how he intends to win when he is clearly weaker than pre-serum Steve Rogers, but he changes the subject and asks if she has ever met a guy that earned her respect. She then tells him about a very special alpha named Sauda that stood up to her years before and became her best friend even after they got separated. After he claims to also have a best friend that calls him Sauda, she decides to text her bestie to tell him about it, but then Sota gets the text on his phone. Realizing that she has been verbally assaulting the only guy she ever loved, she chases him around to apologize and almost falls off the edge, but he saves her. She then gets depressed for not treating him right, but he tells her not to worry about it and ends up causing her sadness to become love. After she tells the girls about it later on and officially becomes the latest member of the family, they get some rest before waking up early again to train for the carnival. Days later, the carnival officially begins, so Rin assigns the girls to a bunch of contests according to their skills, while Mamoru and Sumugi oversee the entire thing to keep track of the winning teams. After Rin, Ruri, and Nanami manage to secure first place in their contests, they go to cheer on Sota as he has to block shots from a Japanese juggernaut. Thankfully, his curse comes in handy and helps him predict the direction of the shot, leading to another win for the team. After Megumo also uses his dump truck to get a lead, Akane returns from a horse riding contest with the Grim Reaper stallion and offers to take Sota to his next contest, but he declines. Seeing how sad she gets, the girls toss him onto the back of the horse, and Akane rides off while he hangs on for dear life. At night, Rin gives them new instructions for the midnight contests, and they all take a break to goof off, but Sota excuses himself to see if his death flag is reducing, but it grows even larger. During his next contest, he keeps thinking about it and loses focus, costing the team their first place position and eventually getting them all the way down to 8th place. The night before the last day of the carnival, the girls hold a meeting to plan a miracle, but Ruri senses some negative vibes and finds Sota brooding in a corner. She then explains how his bad mood is negatively affecting everyone else, and he tells her not to worry because he will be gone soon. She gets confused by the statement and asks for an explanation, so he takes her to the flower garden and tells her about the death flag. Despite being able to topple another person's death flag, he can't do anything about his own and claims to only be worried about how his death will make the girls feel. After telling him to stop the excessive capping, she asks if there is really no other way to stop it, and that reminds him of the battle titles he saw on the letter, so he calls them out. Just then, Ruri accepts the phrase as a special password and connects to a hidden server before saying it has the answer to his problems. He then asks if she can show it to him, so she projects what appears to be a memory of him talking with Nanami, Akane, a version of herself, and a mysterious girl. They all went into the dorm building and followed a secret passageway before getting to a special door that led to a girl. The projection closes out, and Ruri tells him that the file was created decades ago, so he asks if she had been in operation at the time, but she claims to have only been built 2 months ago. He then decides to focus on winning the carnival as the secret passageway might still be in the dorm, which means he can't afford to have it closed down. The next day, he pairs up with Nanami for the final relay race and tells her that he used his pickup lines to give the other girls victory flags, so all they have to worry about is winning the race. He then realizes that he can't actually raise a flag on her, but he doesn't get enough time to figure it out before they start the race. They manage to keep the lead right until they drop the ice block on the table, but Nanami trips and gets her leg bruised up. She still refuses to back down, but the pain slows her down long enough for the other teams to catch up. She then starts to apologize for wasting all his efforts and being too brain dead to get a flag raised on her head, but Sota still refuses to accept defeat and picks her up to finish the race. Rin's insane training pays off and helps him get back to the top, but they cross the finish line at the same time with another team and end up in second place. They then meet up with the others, and Sota accepts his fate. But then Maimoru shows up with the senior executives, who commend their teamwork and promise to keep the dorm open because they still won MVP of the carnival. The next morning, Sota tries to find the secret passageway, but the girls suddenly swarm toward him while arguing and remind him of a promise he made to take Akane out after winning MVP of the carnival. They all get jealous and try to get their own dates as well before deciding to take turns. Nanami then claims to want no part of their shameless obsession, but they pull her aside to plan it out. After the meeting, Nanami goes up to his room to say she will never be interested in going out with a walking death wish before asking him to buy her a special cake. Later on, Sota meets up with Megumu for the first date, and they head to an arcade where he spends hours working the claw machine before finally getting a stuffed bear. Just then, he spaces out and tries to figure out why a flag appeared over the letter, but Megumu snaps him out of it to finish their date. They then head to a cafe to get sundaes, and Megumu challenges him to an eat-off. After a few minutes, Sota finishes his cup, while Megumu starts to regret coming up with the idea. To save his belly from imploding, Sota decides to help him finish the cup, but then he gets some of it on his face, and Megumu reaches in so Sota can lick it off. Everyone in the cafe suddenly gets kiss flags on their heads and eagerly waits for Sota to suck faces with him, but he disappoints them by cleaning it off with a napkin. After surviving the confused femboy, he meets up with Akane, and she takes him to a nearby river for a canoe date. When they get to open waters, her usually high confidence vanishes due to being so close to his face. She tries to show off her paddle skills and almost capsizes the boat, so he suggests paddling together instead. Just then, she slips and he manages to save her, but the water causes her plot cannons to become visible. Several minutes later, they get to her family's library, and she takes him to the spot where she got separated from her childhood friend, just to thank him for helping her experience true friendship again. With Akane satisfied, he heads over to a park for Rin's date, and they both reminisce on the times they had fun together as kids. After seeing one of the pictures from back then, they think back to that evening because they had challenged each other to reach the top of a smokestack, and Sota wanted to seal it in the history books with a pissing contest. Despite knowing that her stream goes in a separate direction, she went ahead with it, but the memory becomes too embarrassing and causes her to pass out. He ends up having to carry her, and that ruins his date with Kikonu, so they head back home. After tucking her in, he goes over to Kikonu's room to apologize, but she makes him lie on her thigh and takes him back to the day he promised to become her younger brother. Later that day, the girls get into the bath and thank Nanami for giving up her opportunity to go out with him since it gave them more time. But she keeps acting like it made no difference. Meanwhile, Sota leads her cake by the door before Ruri takes him to the secret passageway and explains how she had to drill it open as they make their way inside. After getting through the door, they find a box and nothing else, so he tells Ruri to leave it alone so they can get some rest. He then spots a huge crack, and Ruri tells him that it leads to the forest. But then a blinding light suddenly begins to shine through, so he tells Ruri to keep the girls safe before running through it and climbing out of a well to see a lightning-powered chick named Mei. The next day, Mei joins his class and shuts down everyone that tries befriending her, as she can also see flags. Sota racks his nearly empty brain trying to figure out who she is, but then Kikonu shows up to distract him with her beauty. Akane and Megumu then show him the field trip list because his name ended up on both sections, so Ruri calls Maimoru, who then apologizes for signing him up for both trips and tells him to find his way around it. After a long and extremely depressing bus ride, they get to the beach, but Ren and Kikonu both drag Akane away to go hiking while Nanami and Megumu head straight to the water, with Sota following close behind them. After an overdramatic build-up, Megumu shows off his swimsuit, but Nanami almost blinds Sota before he can react. Shimiji then catches up to them and waits for the shock from seeing her chest pillows to stop before asking why they aren't swimming yet. To get the party started, she pushes Sota into the water, but he immediately starts puking, so they take him back to the beach. The girls then tell Tsumugi about the traumatic events of the cruise liner and how it permanently screwed up his life, so she smothers him with her melons to ease the pain. Still eager to help him swim, she tells Ruri to take the others away and tries to get him started on the shallow end. but he continues puking and decides to take a break. At a bench moments later, a girl named Kurumiko sells him a bottle of water, but the taste almost sends him to the shadow realm. She apologizes and tries to give him a popsicle, but he tells her not to worry and spots a special storyline flag on her head that gets him curious. He then tries to get acquainted and asks a bunch of questions about her family and school, but she gets overwhelmed and runs off. Later on, Sota meets up with the girls and other students on the field trip to get instructions from Sensei Golden Globes, who basically cancels his hiking trip for another day at the beach. This time, he goes back with Ren, Kikonu, and Akane, who then drag him into the water and cause his insides to flip again. After she apologizes for being inconsiderate, he tells them to have fun without him, so they run off, and Kurumiko shows up again to sell popsicles. As they start talking again, Akane comes back to meet her and offers to buy off the entire cooler. While she shares it with everyone on the beach, Sota tells Kurumiko about her disgustingly rich family, and that causes the independent baddie to lose confidence when Akane gets back. She runs off again, so Sota chases after her, and she tells him that being around someone who was born with a diamond spoon makes her struggle seem a lot more painful to bear. After he tells her to never look down on herself because of what someone else is doing, she takes him to a cave by the water and admits to knowing who he was when she first saw him. He then realizes that it is about the cruise liner, and she explains that her parents were members of the crew who also didn't make it. He expects her to want revenge because he survived instead of them, but she claims to only be upset that they didn't make it back to her and says she feels better knowing that he can understand her pain. After offering her some advice that helped him get through most of the pain, he sees the tide coming in and realizes that they are trapped. Minutes later, practically the entire cave gets covered, so she apologizes for not paying attention and wishes she had a big brother like him that would have helped her through everything. Just then, death flags spring up on her head as she accepts that they might not make it out, but then he promises to be the older brother she never had, and that gives her hope. Unfortunately, the death flag still returns, so he goes a step further by offering to help her start a new life back at the academy, and that does the trick. Just then, they see what looks like the Loch Ness monster swimming towards them, but it turns out to be Ruri, who then says she has been searching for him the entire time before helping them get back outside. On the way back to meet the others, they all spot a mysterious chick standing by the water. Sota gets closer and sees tears running down her face, but she tries to run, so Ruri tells him that it's just Megumo. The estrogen-stuffed femboy then claims that his sister is on vacation nearby and made him wear girly clothes again. Afterwards, Sota introduces Kurumiko to everyone else back at his room, but while they all get excited to see her, Kikonu gets jealous because of the promise he made to be her brother. As her jealousy begins to spread to the others, Kurumiko apologizes for trying to ruin their harem, but Kikonu decides to stop trying to gatekeep his glizzy and officially welcomes her with a smothering hug. Sota then tells Tsumugi about his decision to get her into the academy, so they go to see Mamoru, who then crushes his hopes by saying it is impossible to make her a student. To motivate her, Tsumugi makes Sota agree to go on a date with her in exchange for pulling a few strings, so she accepts. The next day, she stuns Sota with her dress before taking him to a nearby stream for the date. Seeing that she still doesn't have a flag, he decides to let his guard down for once, but that causes her to think he doesn't even like her. After she apologizes for not being like the girls he is used to and says she can't do anything to change the way she is, he tells her to stop thinking less of herself because she at least knows how to live in the moment. Sensing the sadness in his tone, she comforts him with her chest pillows, and he finally sees a love flag on her head. She then promises to do anything to make him happy and spends the rest of the day trying to get Kurumiko admitted into the academy. Before heading back the next day, they both break the bad news to her and apologize for getting her hopes up, but she tells them not to worry about it and claims to be satisfied with the time they spent together. Later on, they get back to the dorm building and find her waiting inside, thanks to Mei. After Mei tells them how she hacked into the student database to make Kurumiko a student, Mamoru and Tsumugi announce their decision to move into the dorm, and Mei gets up to leave, but Kurumiko convinces her to move in as well. The next day, Sota finally gets a chance to speak with Mei on the roof, and she explains how the powers he got from Sakura are extremely dangerous before asking for his plans with them. He then tells her about his death flag and says he plans on figuring out the truth of their world after toppling it. To speed things up for him, she opens up a portal to an alternate dimension where he runs into versions of Kikonu and Rin that have never seen him before. Mei then takes him to the day he first met Nanami and makes him watch the truck smash her so he can understand how powerful he truly is. After making him see what should have happened to the others as well, he ends up on the cruise liner and spots who he thinks is the version of himself from that day. After seeing that it is actually Miyuki and asking if she knows about the dorm, she tells him that her great-grandfather went missing in the secret cavern. He then realizes that she is in a completely different timeline and gets separated by a wall of flames, but she finds hope again and promises to survive before Mei pulls him back. She tries to explain how he can basically play around with fate, but he suddenly starts losing blood, and she realizes that the death flag is trying to end him. To save him, she grabs it to drain its effects, and her desire to save him causes a love flag to spring up in the process. After managing to suppress it, she gives him a kiss and promises to stay by his side. But then Sakura appears and zaps her memory to stop her from affecting his destiny. Moments later, he wakes up on her thigh and gets confused, so he starts asking questions to understand what happened. But her equally confused response to everything makes him realize that she doesn't even know about the flags anymore. Days later, Kikonu treats Sota to a soothing nap on her front porch, while Rain gets jealous and keeps trying to make her stop. After Kikonu reminds her that they might not get another chance to spend summer break with him, she joins them to have some watermelon before Ruri drops out of the sky and abducts him. Minutes later, they get to Akane's family estate, and she apologizes for nearly giving him a heart attack before going to get her nuts and bolts tuned up. Akane then takes him inside, and he takes a moment to really come to terms with how unbelievably wealthy her family is. Scared that her luxurious life might make him insecure, she begins to panic and tries to tell him that she is still the same love-struck dummy he knows, but he tells her not to worry and promises to treat her like he always has. Afterwards, they try to enjoy some tea, but the other girls all show up at the same time to make sure he is okay. After apologizing for having him abducted, Akane treats them to a royal meal, but Kuruiko gets overwhelmed by the fancy set and asks for help, so Sota tells her to copy whatever Akane does. Due to also being a bunch of broke freeloaders, the others also copy her every move and end up ordering a Gym Bros dream dish for Sota. By sundown, he tries to relax in the bath and sees someone step in, so he goes to meet them, expecting it to be Megumu. After getting close enough and seeing Rin, they both try to hide their goods and argue over who should be in the bath until she hears the others coming in and pulls him behind a rock to hide. He tries to thank her and finds her in a vegetative state as the trauma of him seeing her chest pillows begins to catch up. He tries to snap her out of it, but she freaks out and ends up attracting the other girls. While she keeps them busy, Sota then uses the opportunity to get out so they don't drain his nuts until they fall off. Later on, Nanami gets a call from Akane and gets shocked when she sees them all having a pillow fight, so she makes them get a flight to her home country. After taking a pillow to the face, she leads them to the royal train for one last trip to the palace, and Akane tries to feed Sota after they get seated. Just then, a mini Ruri jumps out with Akane's melon wraps on her head and explains that her main body is still in maintenance. A few minutes later, Sota finishes up in the men's room and is just about to head back when a princess named Hakue shows up with her guard maids and gets excited to see someone from Japan for the first time. She then takes him aside to talk about the culture until Nanami comes looking for him and almost crushes his nutsack for rizzing up her sister. Seeing that they act formally with each other, he asks why, so Nanami explains how their dad gave birth to dozens of kids with different baddies by pumping loads faster than Johnny Sins. Before he can ask more questions, Ruri 2.0 shows up and tries to take Hakue out, so the guard maids do their best to fight her off while Sota escapes with the girls. After Terminator Ruri takes out the maids, little Ruri shows up and explains that she is probably a hacked newer model before promising to stop her. Ignoring her currently meaningless existence, she keeps chasing after them and almost blows off Sota's head with a photon blaster. Realizing that they are on the last car in the train, he flips the lever and smashes the brake to separate them, and Terminator Ruri gets shut down by a mysterious swordswoman. Sota and the girls eventually get to a town nearby, but Hakue keeps getting scared by the peasant lifestyle of the commoners, so they wait by a fountain, hoping to get help soon. Nanami then tells Sota that their father is suffering a terrible illness, which would explain the assassination attempt, as they both have rights to the throne. Just as she mentions something about an organization called the House of the Seven Virtues, a squad of cloaked knights shows up with the masked lady to take them to the castle. Minutes later, they get there, and the rest of the girls all swarm around Sota to make sure he is safe before asking why he is suddenly close to Hakua. They keep talking about what happened until the crown prince, Elias, comes out to see Hakua and Nanami, who then explain that he is their older brother. After making sure they are safe, he thanks Sota for protecting them and heads back inside to have a discussion with the masked lady. He had apparently leaked out information on the royal train's route on purpose to lure out anyone looking to seize the throne and got help from her. He then asks for the secret her organization has used to keep their nation safe for centuries. But she reminds him that they protect the entire world and teleports herself away. At the time, Sota tries getting the girls to leave his room, but they all refuse, and Hakua decides to watch TV for the first time. Her show suddenly gets interrupted by Elias, who then informs the entire nation of the king's passing. He further explains that he actually passed on earlier that day and claims that he delayed the announcement because of the assassination attempt on the train. A reporter then asks why the girls were targeted, so he tells them that they are actually his daughters, which means that they will become queens after him. After holding a funeral for the old king, Hakua and Nanami apologize to the rest of the gang for a sad summer trip, but they all promise to help her get through the loss. Hakua then tells them about a celebration for the incoming king and walks out, so Nanami tells them that she was the old king's favorite princess. Days later, the celebration begins, and Hakua appears to have improved, but Sota waits until he can get close and asks why she is pretending to be okay. She then admits to not liking how everyone else seems to have just moved on, so he reminds her of the special attention she got from the old king and says he would have wanted her to focus on being happy as well. The others hear their entire conversation and begin to feel bad for Hakua, so they decide to keep her company for the rest of the day. After sundown, Sota tries to relax by the water fountain, but then he senses something and spots a tablet with a story inscribed into it. The masked lady then shows up and introduces herself as Number 0 before telling him about the story. Long ago, the kingdom was attacked by demons, and one of the two queens survived long enough to raise the royal banner before also falling to an attack. A boy then became the royal banner and received powers from a goddess, but instead of using it to save himself, he brought the queens back to life and became a flag they kept raised to remember his sacrifice. Realizing how similar it sounds to his situation, Sota spirals into a dark place in his mind as he struggles to accept that he might end up losing his life to save the girls. Number 0 manages to snap him out of it and asks if the world is worth sacrificing himself for, but he struggles to give an answer, so she leaves him to think about it. A couple of nights later, Mamoru gets back from her activity-filled holiday and gets excited to see Sota again. But she finds Hakua in his room and realizes that he has always been an alternate dimension R. Kelly. In class the next day, Miyuki introduces her as a new student, and her beauty causes everyone to lose their senses. After Miyuki tells them to focus on preparing for the festival week, classes get dismissed, so Sota meets up with Megumu to talk about all the progress Hakua is already making. Just then, she hands him a bunch of forms and tells him not to worry about reading, as it is just an agreement stating that she belongs to him forever. After the slow-brained PDF signs them all, Megumu takes a look and tells him that they are actually endorsement forms for all the girls to partake in a beauty pageant. Hakua had apparently planned the entire thing with everyone else in class, so he ends up helping every single one of them prepare for the pageant. That night, he finally gets the peace and quiet he has always wanted, but it causes him to remember the talk with Number 0, so he grabs the letter from his desk and uses the window to see how much his death flight has grown. Just then, Nanami asks if he is okay because she can tell that something is up, but he hides the letter and tells her not to worry about it. After another long day of work, the festival finally begins, and the pageant turns out to be the first and most exciting event in the entire academy. After the announcers introduced Tsumugi and Sota as the judges, the girls introduce themselves and explain why they deserve to be the queen that rides Sota's magnum. For the first challenge, they all change into plain shirts, and Sota gets forced into spraying them with a water gun until their melons and cakes become visible. As the girls take every opportunity to make it sound like a depraved frat party, Sota gradually becomes traumatized until he sprays Nanami in the face and almost loses his head. After a couple more challenges, the girls all end up with an equal score, so the announcers decide to let the crowd pick the winner by judging their confessions. Nanami gets sent out first, so she takes off her hair clip to delude herself into thinking she is hot stuff. She then talks about how she first saw Sota as a testosterone-lacking loser who loved to play the victim, but gradually warmed up to him as she realized that he was actually a troubled individual with a desperate need for intense therapy. Hearing that from someone that he still hasn't raised a flag on causes him to tear up, and all the others also get emotional, so they ultimately decide to make her the winner. She then receives a free pass to all the food stands and goes around campus stuffing her face until he tells her to take a break. After she tells him to stop whining, a four-eyed chick suddenly crashes into him and asks to be hidden. Seconds later, a bunch of students run down to find her and eventually give up, so Sota asks who she is, and Nanami goes nuts when she sees her face. She then tells him about Sarika's amazing career as an idol and everything she has accomplished, but he still has no idea who she is, so Nanami apologizes to her on his behalf and asks why she is in their school. After Sarika tells them that she has a concert on the last day of the festival and just wanted to come see what the stage looks like, Nanami makes sure the uniform is enough to hide her identity before they take her around campus to experience regular life for once. Later on, they finally get to the stage, and Nanami asks if she is disappointed by the size, but then Sarika tells her about her first concert years ago that was held at her school's gym, as she had only just made her debut back then. After that, she barely made any hit songs and slowly lost her fame and recognition to the point where she considered giving up. On the day she had planned to accept defeat, a hooded Chad suddenly showed up and assured her of a successful future because he could see a victory flag on her head. Sarika then apologizes for talking too much and tells them both to be at the concert before running off. Nanami then asks Sota if he was the hooded Chad, but he tries to play dumb, so she grabs his shirt and threatens to permanently destroy his baby maker. He immediately admits to it and tells her that he was actually planning to end himself when he saw her and decided to use his powers for the first time. After asking why he stopped using his abilities like that, she tries to shake his head off for having a deeper connection with Sarika than she can ever imagine. Later on, they get back to the dorm, and she calls everyone out to yap about how ready she is for Sarika's concert. But they all get changed to show off their outfits, so she runs off to sulk in a corner. On the night of the concert, Sarika takes the stage to greet them all, and her voice causes Nanami to lose her senses for a moment. As she starts to sing, Sota simply watches until he sees a light flag on her head before everyone else gets one and essentially transfers their energy to her. Using his powers, he manages to draw out the same light and realizes that it may be enough to stop the death flag, but then everyone gets frozen. Just then, number 0 shows up and tells him that the numbers all over them are because their world is actually a virtual one, as well as all the others he has been to. After explaining how scientists in the real world created their virtual worlds and placed them under the control of an AI, she tells him that the same AI is trying to take over, which is why he got Sakura's powers, as he is destined to stop it. Hearing all that, he realizes that he might never be able to topple his death flag, but then she also tells him that remaining in his current world would cause it to crash because his powers are too much for the server. After the concert, Nanami and Akane begin searching for him to get a dance, while he gets back to the dorm and says one last goodbye before leaving. At that moment, Nanami feels something leave and suggests searching for him elsewhere, but then Akane asks who the Sota she keeps mentioning is. The next morning, internet and traffic control networks begin to fail, so number 0 sends Sota into the server supporting all virtual worlds. In there, he sees a bunch of mutated angels who claim to be extensions of the AI trying to take over before blasting him. He easily survives the blast encounters by giving them all death flags that obliterate them in an instant, but a new horde appears, so he takes off to fight them in the air, while number 0 watches to help him navigate the landscape. At the time, Nanami is in class trying to figure out why no one else knows who Sota is. After Akane's sudden amnesia, she asked all the other girls, and they all said the same thing. She took them back to the dorm to see Sota's room, but it was locked and they told her it had been sealed off after Akane's floorboard accident. While they all go on with their lives like he never existed, he keeps fighting until the excessive use of powers begins to affect him. Seeing that, number 0 tells him about the main server keeping all the virtual worlds active and makes him focus on defending it to keep the girls safe from extinction. By then, months have passed in their world, and it eventually gets to graduation, at which point they find out that the dorm is to be demolished after Mimoru leaves for college. After they all decide to move out of the dorm and start heading home for the holidays, Nanami runs back to find something, and Akane realizes that she is forgetting something important. Nanami reaches Sota's room and manages to break down the door, but all she finds is the letter in his drawer, so Ruri shows up to help her uncover the truth. With a kiss, she sends her into a private network space where she meets a version of herself that claims they are Sota's older sister in the real world. She goes on to explain that the House of the Seven Virtues was established to help their kingdom reign supreme by controlling the rest of the world's information through countless simulations of the real world, but the AI they built to handle it went AWOL, and they couldn't control it. This caused them to develop an interest in Sota and led to his mind being sent into millions of virtual worlds to find the one where he would get the powers needed to stop the AI. Hearing all this, Nanami asks why she didn't stop it, and she tells her that they are actually halves of the same person who got split in two by number 0 for trying to interfere. While Nanami became a decoy sent to watch over him without knowing, she got trapped in a server and eventually managed to escape into Ruri's body, where she remained dormant and could only bide her time to get stronger. To finally become whole again, they merge, and she returns to his room with Ruri before Akane and the others show up to help. She then takes them down into the tavern and explains everything before they all grab the box to help Sota. At the time, he has just seen an entire sea get filled with defeat flags and senses his death flag getting stronger before the cruise liner appears and tries to nuke him with a blast. Thankfully, he gets saved by Nanami before the others also get transported into the server to fight beside him. After seeing that even Sarika and Miyuki made the trip, he asks why they came for him, so Akane reminds him of the love he helped her and all the other girls experience. They then take turns destroying the AI until it begins to absorb them all into the ship. The next moment, it charges up and lets off a blast that takes out everyone except Sota, who then gets pissed and charges in with the power of his death flag to stop its energy beam from reaching the main server. While struggling to push back against its blast, his mind gets sent to an alternate reality where he and the girls end up on the cruise liner as it sinks. As they try to find a way to the life rafts, he spots a girl all alone and tries to help her, but another blast covers the entire area with smoke and causes them to get separated. The girl then introduces herself as Laplace's demon and somehow already knows his name, but before he can ask how, a man calls out to him for help. Sota rushes over and manages to lift the table off his back. Just then, another engine blast rocks the ship and causes Sota to get trapped by debris, so the man promises to get help and runs off, leaving him with Laplace's demon, who then taunts him for trusting that the man will actually come back for him. Sota's hopes quickly turn to despair as he realizes that it might actually be over for him, but the man returns with a couple of others and the girls to help him. In the process of trying to help him, another blast knocks a pillar down towards them, but Laplace's demon freezes time at the last moment to give him an ultimatum. To save them, he has to take all of their death flags into himself and live with despair and hatred for the world, while they will survive and have no memory of him. Not ready to see them die, he accepts and absorbs all their death flags into himself before the pillar drops. Back at the fight with the AI, he realizes that he has to sacrifice himself and get wiped clean from all their memories, but he decides to go ahead with it and begins to break apart as he uses every ounce of energy left. Just then, the girls all get behind him to support him one last time, and he uses their help to defeat the AI. Moments later, he wakes up in a hospital bed, and number 0 walks in to explain that he is back in the real world. She further explains that he got into an accident just after enrolling in the academy and was unconscious for a while, so she sent his mind into the virtual world to defeat the AI after telling him to forget about everything that happened, as it was all just a few hours compared to real time. She wishes him luck and leaves before Nanami shows up and excitedly hugs him. Days later, he joins the academy and heads over to the dorm, where he sees Akane and remembers that the version of her that knows him is in the virtual world. After introductions, she tries to show him to his room, but then he remembers the floorboard accident and luckily makes it in time to save her. As the days go on, they all begin to find their way back to each other and end up back at the dorm again. Being the only one who remembers the virtual worlds, will Sota manage to rebuild his harem with the girls again, or settle into an average student life to keep them safe from his powers? That's it for this video. If you liked it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to be the first to see our next recap.